What's up, guys? We're gonna talk about reading an insurance estimate here today. We're just gonna get into the basics. Obviously, this is stuff we deal with every day. Every once in a while, homeowners and sales reps, if they're new, can be confused on how to read the insurance estimate, or we call it the insurance paperwork. It's really not very difficult when you really get into it. It's pretty basic, pretty simple stuff. There are a few things you want to know and a few key points we want to look at and point out, but we're just going to go into it here. This is an example of an insurance estimate here. You can see it's got probably 7-8 pages. There's a bunch of different line items that shows specifically what is and what isn't covered. If it's not covered, obviously it's not going to be shown on the estimate, but we want to look at the scope of work, and we're going to go through this. We're going to talk about how to read it, how to interpret it, what it means. Again, it's pretty simple stuff. One thing that people get confused about sometimes is we'll ask for the insurance paperwork and they'll send over something like this, 2 pages, sometimes it's 1 page. This is not going to do us any good. This is basically it's a summary letter, and it doesn't really show us anything that's itemized, so it doesn't really show us the scope of work. It'll just have some general statements and some numbers like this. They talk about, hey, we've mailed you a check for $19,000 some odd dollars. Well, this doesn't do us any good. This is actually for a separate client, but we don't know what's covered in this $19,000. We don't know if that's the roof, if that's the siding, if it's roof and gutters. It could be anything. So we always want to see an itemized estimate. That way we know, hey, did the insurance company miss anything? Is there items that should have been covered in their scope of work that weren't? Did they pay for the whole roof? Did they pay for half the roof? What's going on here? What's going on with this project, with this claim? So anyway, we're just going to jump right into it here. So we've got a basic example of some insurance paperwork. This is the cover page here. Usually it's going to have the homeowner's information, maybe the adjuster's info, claim number, policy number. They'll usually have the deductible. Every cover page is a little bit different, but they're usually roughly the same thing. So that's your cover page. You get into the second page here, and now we're going to get into some of our line items. And one thing I will touch on briefly is this estimate was written in Xactimate. So Xactimate is used by most insurance companies. It's used by most contractors. It's what you're going to see probably 95% of the time. Some insurance companies use a program called Symbility. It looks similar to this, but it's a little bit different. In Symbility, they tend to not break the estimates up into these nice categories like this, so everything you'll just see a full page of lines. You might have the roof, the gutters, the siding, windows, and everything just is a bunch of lines, whereas in Xactimate, they actually break each thing up into separate categories, so it makes it a little easier to read and see what amounts they paid for certain items. But anyway, Xactimate is the basic, that's the standard, right? That's what everybody uses. Xactimate calculates fair market value for labor and materials. It updates every month by zip code. So a lot of times if a big storm comes in, you'll see the pricing will increase a month or 2 after the storm. It's basic supply and demand. As demand for labor and material goes up, the price goes up. That's just how it is. So Xactimate will update with increases in demand. Xactimate's great because we're never arguing price with the insurance company. The price is what it is, right? So if you look here, you've got a unit price, one dumpster, $455. We don't ever argue with the insurance company and say, well, actually, that dumpster is going to cost us $525. It is what it is, right? You've got tear off here, 18 squares of shingling. You got $37.81 a square. right? Now it's funny because in this estimate, I think this was the initial estimate, so some of this stuff is actually a little bit low, which we'll touch on here in a second. But we don't ever argue the unit price. We don't have to. It's already calculated. Fair market value has been established by Xactimate. Everybody accepts that, right? So what we will argue is quantities or scope, right? So a lot of times what'll happen if you actually look at this estimate here, the roof is going to be somewhere around 28 square, give or take, so 2,800 square feet. And you look here, you add 10% for waste, typically that's going to be 3 squares. You've got 31 square shingling for application, right? It's 3,100 square feet. The roofing felt, they've allowed 2,800 square feet, which is the actual size of the roof. With the shingling, they gave us a little waste. Well, we can see here for tear off, they only paid for 18 squares to be torn off. So it looks like they made a mistake, right? We should have 28 squares for tear off. So this is something where when we write our estimate up, we would plug these lines in and we would have 28 square for tear off. And that's gonna bump the price up a little bit. So insurance kind of lowballed us here by taking 10 squares. So if you take 10 squares times 37.81 a square, you're sitting, that's about 370 bucks, right? And you know, there could be other items. Sometimes you go through these and let's see, we've got 4 exhaust caps. We've got some drip edge, 358 feet of drip edge. Now these exhaust caps could be bathroom vents and a kitchen vent. I don't see any turtle vents here on the roof. So that's something we'd want to have them add on. I think this roof had 9 or 10 turtle vents. I'd have to look at the pricing, but you're probably looking at, oh, I don't know, 50 bucks a pop. You know, there's another 500 bucks. So right off the bat, there's 2 items in this estimate that weren't included that should have been, right? So that's, you know, we're looking at 800 bucks right off the bat. And that's without actually going through and looking at our measurement report and our roof scope form and photos of the house, you know, but we scan through all that stuff. We put together a scope of what needs to be replaced. We compare that with what insurance covered. And if there's any discrepancies, we'll send the insurance company a supplement, right? And along with that supplement, we'll send them proof, you know, either photos or diagrams or measurements or PDFs of Minnesota State Building Code. And that way that'll back up whatever we're supplementing or requesting. We'll give them some proof of why it's needed, right? So we don't just throw stuff in the air. We don't ask for stuff that's unwarranted. It's not what we do. But if it's on the property, if it needs to be replaced, then it is what it is. So anyway, we're looking here. This is, again, we're looking at the roof. Down below, you can see there's some stuff for downspouts. Really, that's it on this claim. You've really got just the roof and some downspouts, so it's pretty straightforward. So here's what we want to talk about. This is the big thing. Okay, we're looking at RCV, depreciation, and ACV. So RCV right here, what does that stand for? Well, that stands for replacement cost value. So this is the full amount that the roof is going to cost, right? It's the full amount we're going to bill, and that's the full amount that the insurance company is going to pay, ultimately, minus the homeowner's deductible. But this is the main amount. So the ACV, talk about that column. What does that mean? Well, that means actual cash value, okay? The actual cash value is the depreciated value of the roof. How do they come to that number? Well, what they do is they look at the age of the roof or whatever item it is that's damaged. They depreciate it based on age, right? So if you've got say a shingle that's warranted to have, say, a 30-year lifespan, and it's 10 years old. What they're going to do, it's lived 1/3 of its life, they're going to depreciate that roof by 33%, right? So if you had a $10,000 roof, you'd get $6,666. Or if it was a $15,000 roof, you'd get 10 grand, right? The other third would be withheld under the column of withheld depreciation. Now that depreciation gets released once the item is replaced, right? If the item isn't replaced, you don't send the insurance company an invoice for it, and you don't collect the depreciation, right? So in this case, we've got a roof here that was $14,565. This roof was only a few years old. It was, I think, 3-4 years old. Not sure the lifespan the insurance company put on it, but it looks like something in that range. They didn't depreciate it much. You see the roof was only depreciated $1,800. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how much they depreciate it if the client has a full replacement cost value policy, which most people do, because they end up getting this depreciation back here on a second check once the work is completed. So anyway, this homeowner got a check up front. ACV value $12,766. We go down here, we look at the downspout, same thing, $504.12. He gets some depreciation if he completes those downspouts. So if you want to figure out what's the first check that the homeowner got from their insurance company, well, it's always the actual cash value of every item in the estimate minus the deductible, right? So you could take $12,766 plus $504 minus his deductible of $1,000, and that's going to be the amount of the first check that the insurance company sends, right? And if we were to actually do that, there's another page that we didn't look at. There's a small gutter labor minimum in here of $105.66. So if we were to total that $12,766, $504.12, and $105.66 for his gutter labor minimum, we would get this amount right here, $13,376.12. That's the actual cash value for the entire claim, right? What they do, they subtract the deductible out, $1,000. They cut the homeowner a check for this amount, $12,376.12. Now, if the homeowner completes every item in this estimate, if he replaces his roof, every item on the roof, which is important because sometimes you'll have a furnace cap on here. We typically don't do those because we're not an HVAC company, so we would subtract that out, right? Every once in a while you'll find some weird things included in that roof category that maybe we won't do or don't need to be done. So you got to subtract those out. But in this case, we'll keep it simple. If the homeowner does his roof and his downspouts, guess what? He's going to get another check for this amount. Excuse me. And that's the amount of the recoverable depreciation. And they list it right here, recoverable depreciation, $1,862. So what happens now, if you take this amount, this was his first check, right? His ACV value minus his deductible. He does the work, he gets this recoverable depreciation, that's his second check. Right, this is how most claims work. There's a first check, the work is completed, he gets a second check, right? Now this is the total for recoverable depreciation. This assumes he completes every item in this estimate, right? Now let's say, theoretically for a second, let's say he doesn't. Let's say he decides not to do these downspouts. What happens then? Well, guess what? You can't collect the depreciation. He can't invoice, or we can't invoice the insurance company for the downspouts. So if we do just the roof, we would send an invoice in for $14,565.81, right? we would not include the downspouts on that invoice, right? So what's going to happen? Well, he's going to lose out on that depreciation for the downspouts, $62.64. Not the end of the world, right? You might say, hey, I'll keep those downspouts on my house. I don't want to replace them. You know, they've got a couple dents. Not a big deal. I'm going to keep that $504, and you know, he'll do whatever he wants with it, right? He'll allocate that $504.12 in any way he sees fit, right? At that point, it's his money, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal. There's no issue there. Where it becomes a problem is if you tell the insurance company you replaced those downspouts and then you try and get that depreciation when you didn't do the work. That's a problem. The other thing is if you don't replace the downspouts and you keep this money here, well, the insurance company is not going to cover those downspouts again, right? Because they're not going to pay for the same item twice, right? If you replace the downspouts, they would cover them again in the next storm, but if they're not replaced, that's it, right? They're not going to cover those downspouts the next time he's got an issue. So with downspouts, again, it's not the biggest deal. It's not the end of the world. But anyway, so we're talking about some totals here. So what would happen is if we did just the roof and not the downspouts, well, he would get this, right? So instead of collecting this full depreciation amount, $1,862.11, he would actually get $1,799.47, right? Or if there were items in his roofing category that he didn't replace, let's say there was a furnace cap in here and there was $50 worth of depreciation, well, we would not include, we would subtract the furnace cap from our replacement cost value, right? And there's not one in here, but let's just say theoretically there was, and it was $50. Well, what would happen is we would invoice $14,515.81 for the roof. And whatever the depreciation value was that was assigned to the furnace cap would also be, it would end up lowering this depreciation amount, and he would get, you know, whatever, $1,775, right, instead of $1,799. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is you get the depreciation on each amount or for each item that's replaced, right? If the homeowner didn't do the drip edge and we didn't invoice for it, he would lose out on the $110.62 for the drip edge, right? Because we don't invoice for it. So just trying to kind of explain how this functions, and we're trying to explain the mechanics here of the insurance estimate and what this stuff means, right? In essence, it's pretty simple. You've got a replacement cost value, you've got depreciation, right? You've got your actual cash value, you've got a deductible, and you've got your recoverable depreciation, which is the same as depreciation, right? It's pretty simple. You go through here, you look at each item, you can see, okay, well, up front they paid $12,766.34 for the roof. Homeowners are going to get another $1799.47. Once the roof is completed, he's going to get a total of this amount, $14,565.81. And that's really all you need to know. That's how it works. Then you go through though and you look at some of the quantities in the units, right? And it tells you how it's broken apart. You've got linear footage, you've got squares. You know, one of the things at first glance I noticed, okay, we've got 31 square for the roof. I know this roof is about 31 square with waste because I've seen the hover report with the measurements, right? But at first glance I could tell, hey, you know, they're a little light here for their tear off. They owe us about another 10 squares, you know, so we'll have to address that with the insurance company. But, you know, other than that, looks to be reasonable, looks in line, looks like the scope has been met, except for the turtle vents, which we also discussed. So this is a basic estimate, guys. This is about as basic as it gets, right? Now, we're gonna look at another one really quick. And this roof, this is kind of a bigger claim. There's a little more going on here. Again, written in Xactimate. It's an Xactimate estimate. You can see here this roof is 24 grand replacement cost value. The actual cash value is 20,000. They withheld some depreciation, $4,166. Now the unique thing about this particular claim is, unlike most claims, this claim has non-recoverable depreciation, right? One of the ways you can tell, there's a few ways you can tell. The more obscure way is around these numbers here. There's a little, it's kind of a triangle, right? Rather than the other claim, you get kind of a rounded parentheses. Well, when you see the little triangle around the numbers, it means it's non-recoverable depreciation. So what that means is the homeowner is going to have to pay more money out of pocket above and beyond their insurance deductible. So ultimately the homeowner is going to have to pay that non-recoverable depreciation amount to us, to the contractor. So I'll show you a couple things here. Let's go back to that recap or summary page for this one. So if we look here, you've got the replacement cost value for the claim, 36,000. Actual cash value is 30,000. Total depreciation for the entire claim is 5,852. Now here's the kicker on this one. Non-recoverable depreciation, $4,166.65. The other big one on this claim too is this client is actually kind of pretty unlucky. They've got a huge deductible. Got an $11,000 deductible. So they've got a huge deductible and a bunch of non-recoverable depreciation. So this client is actually going to have to pay $11,136 plus $4,166 to get their work done, because they've got a huge deductible and non-recoverable depreciation. So it's really too bad. Now with this client, we're going to end up getting most of the siding approved. They paid for part of the siding here. They paid for the whole roof. Paid for a bunch of stuff. You got gutters, 5 window screens, mailbox, a light fixture. This is all stuff on the front of the house. They paid for the front of the house, which is all cedar siding, to be pressure washed and painted. And then you see, this is nice how it breaks everything down. You've got your roof. You've got your front elevation. You've got, we're gonna go here, left elevation. We're gonna have to go to the next page to see what they've included. It's a left elevation continued. We've got 22.5 feet of downspout. On the back, we've got 86 feet of gutter / downspout. They always group the gutter and downspout together. We've got 1 comb and straighten the AC condenser fins. Nobody really ever does that. We've got 6 window screens. For window screens, we don't do window screens, but the homeowner can take them off and bring them up to Menards or Ace Hardware or whatever. It's not, we do construction, so we'll do roofing, siding, windows, gutters, we'll do painting, but you know, little stuff. We don't replace mailboxes, we don't do window screens, we don't replace personal property. You know, if somebody's lawn furniture, hot tub cover gets damaged, we don't, you know, it's not stuff we do. It's outside the scope of construction. So it's just not something we or any other construction company will deal with or touch. So anyway, we've got some stuff here on the back. On the right side, they paid for the siding. You see that we've got some gutter, they paid for siding and house wrap. So what happened is, since they paid for the siding on the right side, we verified that this homeowner had coverage for matching. They did. So we ended up taking a sample of siding off of the right elevation, and then we send it down to a lab in Florida called ITEL. They're a third-party material analysis company. They analyzed the siding. A few days later, they emailed back a report saying, hey, the siding's discontinued. Here's your 2 closest potential matches. I went and obtained those matches from the designated supply companies listed on the ITEL report. Brought them out to the property, took some photos, and didn't really appear to match. Sent those to the insurance company. They got the photos. The adjuster called me. She agreed. She thought, hey, this doesn't really look like much of a match. We're going to pay for all the siding, but we just want to confirm that you sent in the right material, right? So we went out there. I met one of their insurance adjusters again, and he pulled his own sample off. They're going to send it down to ITEL just to verify that I'm not sitting around with a stash of discontinued siding, sending bogus material out, to get a bogus report, which obviously we're not doing. But anyway, they'll verify that the siding's discontinued, and then we'll end up getting the siding fully replaced. That'll bump the claim up to probably $50,000, give or take. They paid for the deck to be finished here. So the claim will go up, but unfortunately the homeowner is still going to be stuck paying about 15 grand out of pocket. So what does the homeowner pay? Well, the homeowner typically only pays their deductible, right? If there's items in the insurance scope that they're not doing, sometimes they end up keeping that money. They might apply it towards their deductible, or, who knows what they do with it, right? It's their money at that point. Now, typically the homeowner is just paying their deductible unless they want something done that's outside of the scope of what the insurance company approved. We would write up a separate cash contract for those items. But in this case, the homeowner also has to pay the non-recoverable depreciation amount. So in this case, we would use a separate retail contract. So that way we've got one for the insurance claim, and then it also covers the non-recoverable depreciation amount. So that way the homeowner knows what's going on, which is just as important to us as it is to the client, because we don't want to build a job and get the job done, put all the time and work into it, and then at the end find out the homeowner doesn't have the money to pay. That's not in our best interest. It's not in the homeowner's best interest. It's not a clear and transparent way to do business. Nobody wins in that case, right? So we don't ever want to build a job and have some big surprise bill where all of a sudden, the homeowner owes another $5,000 or $10,000 above and beyond what the insurance company covered. It doesn't work like that. The only times the only time the homeowner owes more than what the insurance company is willing to pay is if there's non-recoverable depreciation, which we would find out before we order the job, or if the homeowner wants something done outside of what insurance approved. The only other thing that's somewhat uncommon is if we tear the roof off and there's a bunch of rotten decking, the insurance company's not going to pay for rotten decking because you can't typically attribute it to whatever storm happened in the last year. Just rot, it takes a lot longer than that. So that's an issue usually that's been going on for 5-10 years or longer. So if there's a bunch of rotten decking, yeah, we charge $100 a board to take the decking off and put new decking on. Usually it doesn't come up that often. If it's 1 or 2 boards, we do it at no cost. It's not a big deal. But once you get into more than that, it is pretty time consuming to take the boards off. Ultimately end up having to cut new boards, pop them in. It's, it sounds easy in theory, but it's not. Slows the roofers down quite a bit. But again, usually we know if there's going to be rotten decking. You can tell when you walk on a roof, you'll feel soft spots. So usually it's something we know about, because we'll have done an inspection, we'll have done an insurance adjustment. So by the time we get ready to order that roof, we've probably been on that roof 2 or 3 times, and you would feel soft spots. But anyway, kind of skipping around, but this is kind of a little more uncommon, but this would be a roof or a claim with non-recoverable depreciation. And I highlight that or point it out because you saw in the first example, this is the most common thing, but on the first example you'll see recoverable depreciation, right? And homeowners, sometimes they get worried because they think, oh yeah, I got a check for $12,000, let me see your estimate. And they think that they have to find somebody to build the roof for $12,376, right? Well, it doesn't work like that. And we're going to touch on that real quick because it kind of brings us into a couple other misconceptions. So the way this thing works is, if you look at our contract, if we're doing a project per insurance, we build the project per the approved and agreed upon insurance RCV price, right? And if there's items that are missing from their estimate, like we talked about earlier on this one, we'll send a supplement and get those items added in. So the insurance company, a lot of times we'll end up increasing this amount, this RCV amount. It'll go up, right? And usually the ACV amount isn't going to be this high. Usually it's going to be more like half. A lot of roofs we end up replacing, they're rated at 30 years and they'll be 12, 15 years old is pretty common. Over 10 years old is really common. So the depreciation will typically be more and the ACV value will usually be less, right? So say you got a $15,000 roof, most of the time the ACV value is going to be $8,500, right? And so sometimes homeowners freak out. They get a check for $7,500 and they think, oh, how am I going to get my roof done? Give me your estimate. I need to find someone who can give me the lowest estimate, so that way I don't have to pay too much out of pocket. Well, it happens all the time. I've been in this business for 10 years and it happens all the time, right? Homeowners think that, and they're just operating off of a misconception. They don't realize that they're going to get that depreciation amount back, right? Just the other day I had to talk to a guy. He called me, and we're going to build a siding on Tuesday. A bunch of steel siding, about a $40,000 steel siding job, right? And when I totaled up the amounts in his insurance estimate, all the RCV columns for his siding, he was at it was like $39,500, right? So I sent him a invoice. I told him I wanted half down when we showed up to start as a down payment for labor and materials, right? Pretty common. So I told him, in this case, everything had been pre-supplemented, so we had final amounts. So I told him what the final cost would be for his siding, and then I gave him the down payment amount, which was like $19,000 some odd dollars. And anyway, he called me and he's like, well, my siding, you're saying it's $39,000. He's like, I'm looking through the insurance paperwork and it's only 26. I said, no. I said, it's not. It's you're looking at about $39,500 for the siding. He's like, well, no, insurance only paid 26. I said, no, I read through the insurance paperwork multiple times. Trust me, they're paying 39 and a half. And he again insisted that insurance was paying 26,500. He said he had the insurance paperwork in front of him, and I told him, I said, hey, look, I've been doing this for a long time, and I bet what you're doing. I told him, I said, I bet you're looking at the ACV column, right? And so I asked him, are you getting those numbers from the RCV column or the ACV column? And then he checked and he's like, oh, I'm getting them from the ACV column, right? And it's kind of tricky too, because the ACV is the column on the right. So I think that's what, people read from left to right. So I think they think that, oh, this is their final number. They don't realize, they don't read all the details. They don't realize they can get that depreciation back. I explained to him, I said, hey, check out the last page of your estimate. And again, obviously it was a different claim, a different estimate than this, but I said, check out the last page. You're going to see that there's a depreciation amount. Now, it should be listed as recoverable depreciation, right? That's money you get back once we replace that siding. I said, we'll send the insurance company an invoice, and they're going to send that depreciation out to you, right? You're going to get the full $39,000, minus obviously whatever his deductible was. And then once I pointed that out, he understood. He said, oh, so I need to total up the replacement cost value column, the RCV column. I said, exactly. Yep, total that up. That's the amount that the insurance company is going to cover. Once I explained it to him, it clicked. He got it. He's like, oh, okay. And he understood that more money was coming after the work was done. And guys, it's a very common misconception. It's something that comes up all the time, right? So usually the adjusters will explain that to the client, but not always. So as a sales rep, you've got to be prepared to understand that. You got to understand this stuff. You got to understand how it works, how it functions, because this is the kind of stuff you need to know to close deals, right? Most of the conversations in this business revolve around this kind of stuff, right? Revolves around, how does the insurance company work? How does their estimate work? That's the biggest thing. This is the biggest denominator. Understanding this insurance process and their estimates and how they work, that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to help you close deals. The conversations I have with clients, probably 98% of the conversation revolves around this stuff. Not it, like 2%, 3% of the conversation revolves around the materials we actually use for replacement. That's like an afterthought. Most people, what they care about is, my insurance company going to approve this thing? If so, are they going to pay the full amount, or how much do I have to pay, right? Basically, they want to minimize their out-of-pocket cost as the least amount possible, right? And they don't want to waste their time. They want to make sure that they can get approved. So when we're knocking doors, a lot of the conversation, and then all the way up until the point to when you pick a roof color, a lot of that conversation revolves around this type of stuff right here, right? And, as far as talking about the actual shingles or the roofing system or the windows we put in, most of the time, that's a very, very small percentage of the conversation, right? It's just how it is, right? That's usually not the stuff that prevents us from getting the deal. And obviously we put on high-end materials. So that goes without saying. But, again, just the last thing we're going to touch on, you get these people and they think that once they get this insurance paperwork, they need to get a bid, right? That's another thing that's going to, stop people or confuse people. They're going to get this paperwork, they're going to get their check, and they think they got to get a bid, and they think they got to find someone to do it for this amount or lower, right? Or they get, maybe the homeowner doesn't even read this paperwork. They don't even know what is and what isn't covered, right? And they get a check for, let's say $12,376, and they think they got to find a contractor to do their roof and gutters for this price or lower, right? They don't realize that they're going to get depreciation. They don't realize that this replacement cost value it's not the final number. This can increase, right? If insurance missed stuff, once you have a claim, that claim is open. It's subject to change, right? If there's items in that scope that the insurance company missed, you know, they can add it on, right? This isn't the final end all be all, right? You know, sometimes people get these claims, they don't want to share the paperwork for whatever reason, right? Maybe they've got their own angle where they think they're going to find a way to make money or keep money off the claim, or, you know, who knows what it is. You know, they don't want to share the paperwork, and then they end up screwing themselves, right? Because they don't realize, hey, the insurance company only paid for half the roof, right? Or they don't realize insurance paid for the roof and, you know, a piece of siding, and if you took a piece of that siding off and sent it in, you can get all the siding replaced, right? Or they don't realize, they think, you know, oh yeah, this is the final amount insurance is paying, but they don't realize maybe on some claims insurance didn't pay for any ice and water shield, right? Or they didn't pay for drip edge or roofing felt or whatever. There's a, you know, anything can be left out. And so what happens is we have to review this stuff. We work directly with the insurance company. We'll come to an agreed upon scope and price. And ultimately the homeowner pays their deductible, right? And that's it. That's really all that matters. At the end of the day, the homeowner pays their deductible, and that's all they have to worry about, right? The homeowner needs to make sure they're getting the work done in using a reputable contractor that uses quality material. They have to pay their deductible, that's it. Or in some odd cases, they have to pay non-recoverable depreciation. But anyway, guys, we're gonna wrap this video up. It's getting pretty long. I know it's a lot of stuff we kind of talked about. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. Tried to keep it simple, but you know, there's a lot of variables, a lot of situations. So anyway, that's it for now, guys. Have a good afternoon if you're watching this, or a good evening, and we'll see you on the next roof. Bye-bye.